Rebecca stood in front of her phone camera for a long moment before hitting record. The late afternoon light filtered through her window, soft and forgiving, casting a warm glow across her face. She adjusted a loose strand of hair behind her ear and took a quiet breath. This wasn't the same woman who had once nervously introduced herself to millions on reality television. This was someone new, someone rebuilt. "Hey, everyone," she began, her voice steady but emotional. "I've been wanting to share this for a while." The video cut to a series of photos, before and after shots that told a story words could barely contain. The before images showed a woman smiling bravely, but there was a heaviness behind her eyes, a quiet exhaustion that lingered beneath the surface. Then came the after, and it was impossible not to notice the difference. Rebecca looked radiant, confident, lighter in every sense of the word, not just physically, but emotionally. Her caption read, "This journey hasn't been easy, but it's been worth every step." For Rebecca, the transformation wasn't just about appearance. It never truly was. It was about reclaiming herself after years of doubt, heartbreak, and public scrutiny. Being on a global stage had its rewards, but it also came with relentless judgment. Every choice, every flaw, every vulnerability was magnified. At first, she tried to ignore it. The comments, the opinions, the endless comparisons, but over time, they began to chip away at her confidence. "I remember looking at myself one day and not recognizing who I was anymore," she admitted in her post, "not because of how I looked, but because of how I felt inside." That moment became a turning point. Rebecca didn't wake up one morning magically transformed. There was no overnight success, no instant fix. Instead, her journey began quietly, with small decisions that slowly built momentum. It started with a walk. Just 10 minutes around her neighborhood. No pressure, no expectations, just movement. The next day, she walked a little longer. Then she began paying attention to what she ate, not in a restrictive, punishing way, but in a mindful, compassionate one. She learned to listen to her body instead of fighting it. She stopped labeling foods as good or bad and instead focused on balance. But perhaps the hardest part wasn't physical at all. It was mental. Rebecca had to confront the voice in her head that told her she wasn't enough, the one that whispered doubts and replayed past mistakes, the one that had grown louder over the years. "I realized I had been speaking to myself in a way I would never speak to someone I love," she shared. So she changed that, too. She began practicing self-kindness. On the days when she felt discouraged, she reminded herself that progress isn't linear. On the days when she felt strong, she celebrated, no matter how small the victory. There were setbacks, of course. Days when she skipped workouts, nights when she turned to comfort food, moments when the scale didn't move, or worse, moved in the wrong direction. But this time, she didn't quit. "That's the difference," she explained. "I didn't give up on myself." As weeks turned into months, the changes became undeniable. Her energy increased, her mood improved, her confidence began to return, not as something fragile, but as something rooted and resilient. Friends and fans started to notice. "What are you doing differently?" they asked. Rebecca's answer was always the same: "I'm taking care of myself." Not punishing, not forcing, not chasing perfection. Just caring. Her latest post captured that perfectly. It wasn't overly polished or filtered. It was real, honest, a reflection of effort, persistence, and growth. In one clip, she laughed, a genuine, unguarded laugh that seemed to echo with freedom. In another, she stood tall, her posture confident, her eyes bright. "This isn't just about weight loss," she said in the video. "This is about finding myself again." The comments poured in almost immediately. "You look amazing. So inspiring. I needed this today." But among the compliments, there were also stories, people sharing their own struggles, their own journeys, their own hopes of change. Rebecca read as many as she could, often responding with encouragement. "You've got this. Start small. Be kind to yourself." She knew what it felt like to feel stuck, to feel overwhelmed, to feel like change was impossible. That's why her message wasn't about perfection, it was about possibility. One follower wrote, "I've been waiting for the right time to start, but maybe that time is now." Rebecca replied, "It is." Her journey also shifted her perspective on success. Before, success had been tied to external validation, likes, comments, approval from others, but now, it looked different. Success was showing up for herself, even on hard days. Success was choosing growth over comfort. Success was learning to love the person she saw in the mirror, not because she was flawless, but because she was trying. I used to think I had to change everything about myself to be happy, she reflected, but I've learned that happiness comes from accepting yourself while still growing. That balance between acceptance and ambition became her foundation. And it showed. In the way she carried herself. In the way she spoke. In the way she lived. Rebecca's story resonated because it was real. There was no illusion of perfection, no false promise of easy results, just honesty. And that honesty made her transformation even more powerful. As the sun dipped lower outside her window, casting long shadows across the room, Rebecca finished recording her video. She paused, watching it back. For a moment, she saw both versions of herself, the woman she had been and the woman she had become, and instead of feeling ashamed of the past, she felt grateful for it. Because without those struggles, she wouldn't have discovered her strength. She hit post. Within seconds, the notifications began to appear. But this time, they didn't define her. They were simply part of the journey. Rebecca set her phone down and smiled softly to herself. Tomorrow, she would wake up and continue another walk, another meal, another moment of choosing herself. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And that made all the difference.